Any of you are there? No. I got your out of office the other day, Emma, so I think you've been on holiday. So I think one came last week. Oh, Ali, is that the Ali Hughes that I know, but you're not normally in Sheffield? Ah, I hope you had a lovely time. Right, okay, so let me keep going and we'll move in the content. We've just started recording. One thing for you to know if you are new to this, we will send you the slides and any links that I refer to. So we'll provide these to you automatically. So Grace, my colleague, will email out after this. So you've got this to reference back should you wish to. Actus, if you're aware of Actus, you may know that we offer a complete performance, talent, and learning management suite. We've got a series of modules, including, I say, an LMS, which is relevant in this area, 360 feedback. But our original, we were originally all about performance management. Not only do we do that, we also offer training and consultancy. So, what are we here to talk about here? We really wanted to explore why is it that training on its own rarely builds sustained capability? What are our challenges in terms of this? We're going to touch on how can we really focus on developing capabilities within our business learning culture, aligning it to organizational priorities, which is interesting and challenging, and think about how we can also link these sort of things with career pathways. So we're just going to go a little bit through a relatively whistle-stop tour on all of these, but I'm really interested in things that you might want to comment on here. So if you've got specific questions or comments, please feel free to pop those in the chat, because often we do end up having some really good interactions there. Now, some of you have already told me who you are, which is really helpful just to have a sense of that as to where you are. So how many of you are, if you don't let us know what interests you about this, is it something that's just generally you wanted to invest in your own development and came along, or have you got a specific L&D challenge to hand? I can see that some of you are L&D is your role. So if there's anything that you can think to share as to what brings you to this, is there anything specific you're interested in? I'll just let a couple of I realise this is an open question, so you've got to think and type. So I'll just give you a moment and see how we go on this. The other interactions are much easier because they're just rankings. Oh, wow, that's interesting. So you're starting an undo function from scratch and you don't want to do it wrong from the, yeah, start off. That's exciting. How to bring about behavior change after attendance at a training event? Absolutely. Training days to every day? Absolutely. Yeah. Making your training as impactful as possible. Lovely. How to new LMS, new L&D strategy and vision. Yep. Yep. Healthy new habits, learning habits, habits of learning. So that's investing in yourself and your own well-being, maybe even attending training. So I'll give just a couple more minutes because I appreciate that's something that it's quite useful for us to see what everybody's here to understand. And let's try and touch on some of these if we can as much as possible. So I'll move on to the next slide because I appreciate it takes a while. If you want to keep on, I'm not sure what happens actually in this circumstance. I think probably you won't be able to type anymore. Oh, here you go. You're still typing, so let me give you a minute. Getting people to invest time in training, much too much, I'm too busy, overtime and impact, sustainability. So some of these are really interesting. And what I might do is come back, we'll try and touch on some of them. Obviously the content is pre-built, but let's work out whether there's other things that we can add more to by having this clarity is what these are. And if anyone in the chat sees that they've got something specific that they can add value to others on here with this, then that's really helpful as well. Okay, so moving on. Why is this so important? And it's great that you are investing in this yourselves, and you're right to, because if you look at the CIPD report from a year or so ago, actually people were saying that fewer than half the UK the job was offering good opportunities to develop their skills, which I think, considering how much things are changing, that's quite crazy because actually we should be developing our skills. With AI, with all the things that are coming around, why are they not getting that? And that in itself is an interesting question. When we talk about culture later, I will point at line manager capability for some of this because quite a lot of it does come down to them, and that could be the issue. We know that training is quite expensive, but it doesn't always link to behaviour change. So what can we do to do more with that? L&D practitioners feel that it's quite tricky to develop a positive learning culture. And we find quite a lot of this. We work with a lot of companies that have to do compliance training. So often an LMS is driven by compliance. But the problem with that is it really can create reluctant learners. They kind of have this sense that learning is a tick box as opposed to something that really brings value. So that can almost work against it. But it's really important if we think about employee engagement, one of the key statements of employee engagement is I have opportunities to learn and grow in my role. So it's definitely something worth focusing on. So Lisa, you're saying you just started to engage people here and it's starting, people want more, and it comes down to do the reward and recognition because people feel valued. Some people, some people are not motivated by money. Some roles, if you work in public sector or NHS, you're not necessarily going to be able to control income, and that's not necessarily a motivator, but being able to learn and grow for people is valuable in terms of something that's a real sort of it's a Hertzberg. It's one of the factors, isn't it, that actually develops ongoing motivation. The research often highlights these are where the learning is separate from the role. So it's not practical, it's not close enough, it's too abstract. The other thing, of course, is line manager capability and time. So what have you put on the thing? Are people too busy to learn? That's an interesting thing, isn't it? That's a real cultural piece. Evaluation is always been, and I was back in the day training, we used to use, they talked about Kirkpatrick, which was a model of ongoing impact in the job, but it's actually really hard to measure impact in a job in terms of development. So it was often about people's satisfaction. They talk about happy sheets, which maybe wasn't really good enough. And the reality is that people still don't necessarily have the capability to do what they need to do, it appears, despite the fact that we're giving them learning. So we're spending money on learning, but people are not upskilling or increasing their capability fast enough. Now, is that something that you're experiencing, that you're feeling? And I wonder, why do you think that is? And is that something you experience? So feel that. But what I got here, I thought these were some of the things just to get a sense of what your learning state is in there. And actually, you might have nothing in there. So to what degree would you say that these elements are accurate for your organization as taking on? So, is it something where it's quite compliance driven, quite LMS driven? Is it something where people just have to get in the sink or swim? They don't really have any training? Range of formal training in initiatives that people go through. It's really nice and structured. Or would you say that you've actually got a reasonably sophisticated learning culture? So by that, I'd say that people understand what training they need to do to get to their next role. You've got induction and onboarding type training in place. People self-serve. You've got maybe if you have an LMS, people are using it more broadly than aligned to career roles and moving on. So just give you a chance to say where you think your organization is. And that's not exhaustive. So if there's a term that would have said, this is how I describe my organization, use the chat for that and tell us where you think you are. Are you sort of hybrid? Are you finding your way? The person who said that they have just inherited a department and you want to get it right from the start. So does that mean it's a total greenfield site for you that no one's ever done anything on it? So you kind of think, where do I start? So tell us what you think there. And you can see this. This is the great thing about this is I have to share. When I do it on Zoom, you can see this live. So we're seeing that there's definitely a sense that there's a bit more tick box compliance going on, a bit of singing. So a few things are going on. No one's really feeling they've got a sophisticated learning culture yet, which makes sense. It's not surprising. The downside about the tick box compliance feel is that I think it just makes people a bit jaundiced. So it's how can we bring it all together? And you know what? Sink or swim learning on the job is not always bad. The problem is if the person feels they are sinking, if they're actually being coached through it, nurtured, mentored, if they know where to turn and the skills in your organization for them to get the learning at the time, that could be brilliant, but it could also be disastrous. So it's maybe that sort of combination is what we're after. Oh, Greenfield. So Hazel, is it yours? So you've got right. Yeah, so Hazel, exactly that. You've got your compliance training in place, which is comprehensive because that's what people have to do. But the whole sort of engaging training, if you like, the training that the purpose of which is to retain people, to grow people, to engage people. That's what you're going to be looking at, isn't it? So that'll be interesting. What a fun job. Um, so if we want to think about learning culture, where we might aspire to having a learning culture, what we're talking about there is an environment where learning is not only embedded, but it's encouraged across every level of the organization. And that would be, Mary, feel free to add a bit more on that in terms of what would that look like for you? Actually, I have got a slide later you can say that, a sophisticated learning culture where people see the value in learning. But that's exactly this sort of idea where it's embedded across every level of the organisation. And it's interesting here for you to reflect on what stops this, and we'll look at it in different levels as to how you can do it or why it doesn't happen. So we've touched on, yeah, compliance tick box can have a negative impact, but role modeling can make a difference. One of the things that used to happen in the business I used to work in was that people say, yes, they want to go on a training course, but then as soon as they get closer to the date, because this was back in the day when you'd go out for a day or two. I mean, it's very rare now for people to go out for serious amounts of time. So we have things, it's little chunks of time. But the manager would pull them off training course. And of course, the message of that is that training is less important or day job. And what that does is it becomes reactive. So it has this ongoing issue in terms of creating reactivity within it. And yeah, think about that. What would that be in terms of, if you think about learning culture in your organization, what would make it or what stops it from being that? So Mary, that was the you'd like to have a singing culture. What would that look like? So for everybody here, if you were to say what would your vision be, or Hazel, your Greenfield, what would the vision be? How would you describe it? It could be a word. Um, how would you recognize it that in, let's say, 18 months time that you've really moved learning on in your organization? How would you recognize it? How would you fluid? So that means really flexible for people to be able to do it. Embedded, so at all levels. So people are doing it as business as usual, learning, as opposed to you having to lecture them or chase them, etc. Proactive, people taking ownership. Very good point. Absolutely. Desired, people want it. Everyone's getting the opportunity to learn it. So all inclusive. It's not just pockets, not just maybe talent or people on a particular succession plan. The right level for that role, that makes sense. Timely, yeah, just in time training. Growth mindset, yes. So where people are learning within their role, maybe with reflections, lessons learned, thinking about what did we do right or wrong. Proactive, continuously given permission to take. So that means that it's encouraged, it's expected, relevant and specified to the person. So it's really relevant. Yes, brought into. So really good sort of consistency here, actually. This is quite a nice, I'll let you get going. So that's really what we've described there. I think you would be talking about a learning culture. If that was going on, people were desiring it, they were learning continuously, they were given permission, it was almost expected that they would develop, they held themselves accountable, they're open to it, the learning is available at the right level, it's interactive, it's collaborative, experiential, then all of these things. Absolutely, people are not afraid to fail, they can make mistakes, and they can learn from them. So you're kind of talking about team learning. This is what it would look like for you. Fabulous. Right, well, I will stop. It's still going, we're still going. Mutually beneficial. Thing is, when it moves around, I can't see which one's the new one coming up. Mentoring. So you'd have mentoring going on. Now so that's where your line managers are coaching and mentoring, and they've got coaching and mentoring on here too. So that's where individuals, this is where it's really organic within your nation, and individuals are helping you to learn. So that's our vision. That's what we would be looking to get to. We need to think about how can we get to that point. So we know that there's a case for building a learning culture. CIPD says it in terms of these sort of things, the engagement areas of it. There are benefits to this. I share this slide because sometimes you have to go and request investment from your business leaders. might not just be investment in money, it might be investment in time. So you put mentoring and coaching on there. So it might be about actually making sure that the leaders within the organization are really role modeling a learning culture. They are encouraging people to learn, their time on it. They're taking it seriously. And same with that, that from them will the managers are going to then really encourage things like knowledge management and sharing. So you get this really organic feel for it. Ultimately, this should result in job satisfaction and business benefits that hit the bottom line positively. So any cost you would hope would actually hit the bottom line in a positive way. But these are the things sometimes we have to build a business case for these. And those are the sort of things that we should, if we're making this case for spending more time on something or trying to really encourage more of a sophisticated learning culture where we create time on a regular basis or we invest in specific skills, these are the things that might help motivate it. Now, capability, this is the thing, this is the whole challenge. Training is basically input, isn't it? So training is where we're giving information. So we're giving information here. And what's nice about this is you're sharing information and we are engaging with it, which gives us a greater chance to take it away in some way. But ultimately, capability is our ability to adapt or improve or basically demonstrate these behaviors on an ongoing basis. So training doesn't automatically link to capability, which is weird, isn't it? You kind of think, well, why is that? And we've touched on the fact maybe it's because it's too abstract. But really, the really common areas are that it's not properly embedded. And this is where the 70-20-10 model, which I'm sure you've all come across, of the challenge you've got for HR and L&D people is that we can't do this on our own. We have to. And actually, in the chat, is anyone using this really effectively? Has anyone got any great tips for the experiential that's worked or working in their organization that you're happy to share? Because I think other people's real ideas are really useful. So our experiential learning is where we want to focus on real world challenges, stretch projects and on the job problems. So this is a bit of your sink or swim where you're really getting that kind of learning, real intense learning in a timely fashion. The risk of that is if there's no one going to catch them, right? So if you fail and you haven't got a psychological safe environment where people fail and they don't know how to fix it, or the failure is problematic. So there's a difference between real world where you're getting real world experience and then putting someone up in front of the biggest customer and they deliver a terrible presentation and it goes wrong and you lose your customer. So experiential, it's got to be close enough to real life, but the consequences need to be safe enough and there needs to be a safety net in place. And that mentoring managers or you also need people who are able to coach and delegate and not micromanage to allow people to have that growth, enough growth, not so much that we make mistakes that really, really matter. Then we can talk about social learning. So the key with the experiential piece is, for me, that's real world challenges. How can we do that as L&D professionals? Well, if you're doing a formal program, and we used to do quite a lot of this, you can put in place real business projects. So can you put projects in place? Could you do co-training? Can you do things like experience shadowing, where people could get involved in things? So there are things that you can do within a job role, or you can enable for people to take advantage of, secondments, etc., which are giving that experiential learning. But the soft landing depends on the skills of those people looking after them. So it does come back to me, usually to line manager, or the general level of skill within the organisation where people are inclined to support others in that learning. So again, your education around psychological safety for line managers. How does people set up projects and give them feedback as to how they're doing, clear goals and guidelines? It's kind of performance management, but wrapped around a specific project. Then you go to something like social learning, and a huge amount of people learn through social learning, and that's talking to your colleagues and peers, learning from things that worked for others or didn't work for others. In terms of that, sometimes people use platforms where you can do lessons learned and use all your systems, where you've got a Slack platform or something for product. You could look up, a challenge that someone's had, and there might be information there. You might have subject matter experts accessible that you could signpost to your organization and enable this. You might do things like lunch and learns. So these are things again that you can facilitate, but you can't control in the same way. You can't control it in the same way as we can control as an L&D person formal learning, right? 10% is formal learning. So the challenge really is, how do you get the culture right in your organization to maximize that formal learning? So that formal learning, how is that put into place and acted on? And it's how do we bring the whole organization with us? I mean, that's apparently the example there is IBM said that they actually reduced training costs by doing this, enhancing by introducing this model. The interesting thing is you really have got to get everybody on board with it for it to work. So any bright ideas in terms of how you can do it, or how you've experienced it? I've mentioned aspects that I've used in organizations to do it, but you start with, it kind of goes from the middle to the left for me, but you have that 10% formal learning where you have that training, give people the foundation, but how do you help them to support it? And it is, again, it means that training isn't just a one and done. It's something like, if you went on a management training course, then how do we buddy with each other and put things into action? We break down our course maybe into online and face to face. So the face to face training could bring in your social learning, where you're having interactive groups, where you're working together, whether it's online or face to face. So bringing in that social and the application bit, and then really putting it into action, and then closing the loop. And the other things you can use as well is thinking about coaching people, as in formal coaching for people. 360 feedback you can do, where you could measure people's skills or capability at the start of some learning intervention and give them that feedback so they know where their gaps are. They've got that self-awareness. They do various activities over a period of time, including experiential learning. And so they've got these capabilities in mind that they want to close those gaps. And then 12, 18 months later, run the same thing again. And that can give you a return on investment, but also shows that actually the learning has happened, has taken place, and they have that self-awareness. So these are the sort of things we aspire to do, but they're not straightforward. That's why lots of people resort back to e-learning or formal training. So how can we go one step forward and really build that capability in here? So for me, it is about helping people understand what those key skills are relevant to their role. So what are the expectations to perform and exceed at this role? And this very much builds into job ladders and things like that. But they then need opportunities to apply that learning, to put it into practice that we've talked about, learning that's aligned with the role and where they want to go. So this might be stuff that they can proactively access in terms of this. You talked about just-in-time learning, and there's a lot of people that talk about how that is about making sure, is your LMS something, if you have an LMS or if you're learning resources, have you got tools where you can go and access something, almost ask a question and get the information that you need there? I mean, to be honest, ChatGPT or whichever one you use, that's actually quite useful just-in-time learning. So if people are motivated, there are easy ways to go and get information subject to health, making sure that it's accurate, etc. But what I think is really, really important is the coaching support and the reinforcement and feedback. So it's having that opportunity where we create time, that this is business as usual at a team meeting. So what have we learned this week? Or if someone asks for something, well, asks a question, what do you think the answer is? Or we give feedback on what we see was really good. That was great. I noticed that when you led that meeting, XYZ was specifically good. We give people really good reinforcement and feedback. Or I noticed those slides were really precise and really, really easy to look at, and less complex than the last that you did. So telling people how they've progressed and help them to catch themselves doing things right. That classic adage from the 1 minute manager, catching people doing things right. So these are, the 1 minute manager is probably 30 years old. These are not rocket science, but actually that's exactly why we still need to do them. But it generally would be human things if you're controlling in the workplace. But you can get AI to help as well. So if you think about priorities for capability building, in your opinion, in your organization, and I appreciate this will be a bit strange because it will average, you won't all agree the same thing, but let's see what the overall amalgamated thing is. Obviously, you are the expert within your organization. If you wanted to, we all know what our vision was. You talked about the vision on our word cloud earlier. What would you say you need to do? And you should be able to rank these by sliding them up and down if you're looking at it on your phone. And I think it would be top from top to bottom. And then if you have something else, interested, what is the something else? Because I won't have thought of everything. Yeah, and I'll talk through these as we look at what those might be. So better defined learning linked to role. The thing with that is roles change so quickly nowadays. It is harder than it used to be. I was talking to someone about job descriptions and they don't really exist very often now. So it's really getting clear about what are the capabilities and skills that people need. And actually, probably one of the most important capability from anyone you want to promote having an organization is curiosity and willingness to learn, to take responsibility. You need people to be open-minded learners as opposed to dependent learners. And to take that ownership. Yeah, that's right. I mean, so you do need that accountability and ownership for people to want to do that. But of course, how do you get accountability and ownership? Well, you have people who are motivated in their own right, but you also have a climate where people feel it is worth them being motivated, and they feel that they're encouraged to learn and they can see opportunities and they have clarity about how those opportunities are. And this is very much about learning. And sorry, I can't remember who, it might have been Hazel who was talking about a learning strategy. With your learning strategy, what I would definitely say is think about how this links to your business strategy as well. So almost understand, where's your organization going? What are they trying to achieve? So for example, have you got a shortage of a certain type of skill? In which case you want people to understand those are the growth skills. If you are in a role where it's yeah, let's say it's a sales role and people come in and it's quite a tough initial, what you really want to do is aspire people to aspire to get to the next level. So people need to have that clarity of what the deliverables are for them to go to the next level. So it is very, very much linked into what the deliverables of each role are, for people to then go, okay, I can see that if I achieve this, then I've got a good chance of getting to the next level. And of course, we need managers to encourage that as opposed to disempower it in terms of this. So, I guess, is it true that people don't have a role profiles anymore? So that's it. Well, that's interesting, Emma. I say don't tend people don't tend to have job descriptions. I find at the moment they don't talk about job descriptions. I do see role profiles, but they need to be organic. So I think my experience, and please anyone else if you disagree or answer Emma's in the chat, but they just seem to feel more fluid. But what you do want is the capabilities for that role. So it is important to have something. Don't ignore it, because you want people to have clarity, and you can't really have clarity about what the expectations of a role are without some sort of understanding of what the purpose of that role is, the purpose of what it is, and the key deliverables. I suppose in most places that I see outside of public sector, that concept of it's above my pay grade doesn't really work. It's very much about you need to work out what to do to meet the demands of the job, which is evolving a lot. So again, any of your comments, really interested to hear. It's great to have opportunities for those sort of comments. So I'm not saying they're not valuable, but they're not the be all and end all. It's not the only thing now to do to align development with. And I guess actually this flips into it too. So you do need to understand a kind of a role profile or where you're going in terms of this. If you want to look at career pathways, particularly if you want to motivate people to go to the next level, then they need to know what skills or capabilities they need to build to be ready for that next level, to get them into the right place. If I was to think about this in terms of line managers, and some of you have seen, there's a book called The Leadership Pipeline, again, quite an old book, but it's really quite useful. Talks about skills of managers going up an organization, and how you have to let go of some skills and build other skills. You could think about that. So if I wanted to go up a management career pathway, but obviously you could have technical career pathways, engineering career pathways, project management career pathways. It's almost going, what are those most important skills that I want to demonstrate at each level? So if I am somebody who's an individual contributor and I want to be considered to be a team leader or manager, then I really need to demonstrate that I can manage my time well, that I can communicate well. I'm good at problem solving, and I take personal leadership, so I'm not a victim. I'll take responsibility for my own learning. That's the sort of person that I would want to promote. These are not, this is not everything. You'd have other specific to your industry type things potentially as well. Maybe not so much in line management, but those sort of things. If you move into line management, what you really need to be good at is giving clarity, helping people to have clear goals, understanding of what their roles are. You want them to be able to provide feedback, really important, good quality feedback and coaching, and comfortable leading others, not just themselves. And then when you go up to the next level, managers of managers, it's people seeing more broadly, how are we aligned, how are we joined up? Can I delegate rather than micromanage? My ability to think strategically to connect things, and my ability to lead through others. So not to disempower others, to help them to help others. So the capabilities build on each other. And that's where, if we were talking to somebody about that, well, how would you demonstrate those? So yes, you absolutely could go and do some traditional training in any of those areas. But then how do you demonstrate you're doing that? Could you get the individual contributor to do this? So thinking strategically, I mentioned if we're going to do this about our learning is how do we think across the three levels? So organizational, team, and individual. So if you're wanting to build your organizational strategy, then it's thinking, looking up, have we got a clear vision for our learning, which the leadership of the business are buying into and are overtly see it, and they see it as critical for delivering the business strategy, because then they're much more likely to buy into it and support it, and not worse, not sort of undermine it. If you're looking at your learning, can you think about areas that are critical roles in your business where you might want to align to it? So the business I used to work for, project management, particularly big complex project management, became a really big thing. So they actually built a project management career pathway with key skills and deliverables which were aligned to that particular role. So if you're in an engineering area, whatever role, then you might have some specific things which would align with a specialist career path. The other beauty of things like that with specialist career paths is then you don't need to necessarily try and push everyone to be a line manager. So actually the best technical expert is not necessarily the best line manager. So it's looking at what the right kind of roles are. Now, depending on how big your business is, you have to prioritize. You can't do everything, but even just high level, these are the sort of things that you'd expect someone at this level to learn. You start to map it out and help people feel that they're progressing. Organizational level is reflection on lessons learned, constructive challenge, positively encouraged. All of those things. Is it something which is invested in? Is the messaging right? Culture, is the messaging right? Making sure that you've got that executive team and the next line down, if you're a bigger organization, that buy into this and they're not seen to be paying lip service, i.e. pulling someone off an important bit of training. They don't go, no, we haven't got time to do that. They very rarely do that. It would have to be exceptional circumstances. Team level, this is about your manager's attitude, and they are probably the ones that can make the biggest difference all round to this. So how could you engage them? Do they buy into and support time spent on formal or informal learning, or even expect it? How skilled are they? Have they had adequate development themselves, and do they get this? Will they be role models and encourage learning as business as usual? What are their coaching skills like? terms of self-discovery and helping people to think for themselves. All those things we said about that self-directed on the word cloud, accountability learning, do they have those skills? Can they help their learners to be purposeful? So can they coach people to be accountable for their own learning? So that would be my area where most businesses can do a bit more. And then individuals, do people know what they want to learn, have a vision? Do they know where the opportunities are? Can they access them? So if you've got stuff, is it well signposted? Do they see themselves as accountable? So during a PDR or an interview appraisal, does the manager say, okay, so what have you done? What have you learned before, where are you learning? Are people asking open questions that basically infer that you are accountable for your own learning? You want to go to the next job, what have you done about it? So all of those sort of things are useful, again, from thinking about the individual. And you can see these 3 levels. That's what we say. If we wanted to really build a learning culture, this sort of thing would be happening at each level. So just drawing towards the end, practical learning takeaways, hopefully. First of all, I'd say step back and think about what have you got already? What's good and what do you want to adapt and make sure it aligns where you want to go. Think about what the implications are for the business strategy, because that will also pepper some stuff in and get more buy-in from a senior level if you can clearly link your development strategy to where we're trying to go strategically. Obviously, ask people what they need, what they want, what's missing. Thinking about the varied and relevant learning content, empower people to create learning content. There's loads of great tools actually out there now as well, where it's so much easier than you'd ever think it would be to build your own. And make it a priority. Ring fence time, encourage managers to ring fence time, set that expectation, and try to make it social, fun, and part of day-to-day life, make it business as usual. And keep on improving. It's iterative, this sort of thing. You don't create a learning culture overnight. It's something that's iterative. So maybe think along the way, what progress have we made as you're moving through? So that's the main aspect of my content. I'm going to give you an opportunity to think of a takeaway to share on our word board at the end. So I'll give you some thinking time while we do that. If you've got any questions that you want to ask to the group here, do feel free. Just as I go through though, I'm going to mention a couple of things that I'm doing in case they are relevant or interesting to you. As part of my personal development, I've been really closely involved in Actus day to day for a long time. I'm not saying how many years, 16. Oh. So I'm feeling very old, and I felt it was time for me to get back to do what I'm passionate about. So I'm moving into part-time within Actus business, obviously still involved, but part-time there. And I'm now going to be doing more consulting under the guise of Hilbury Consulting. I do all of the stuff I've always done, executive training, leadership development. I developed this little series of interactive development sessions. So a bit like this, using things like Menti, but for the whole organisation. So if there's something you're interested in there, Grace has dropped the consulting brochure for more information. I'm working with a couple of international clients who've got like 100 people on each one, but it works really nicely just to have something where you're thinking about stuff at a leadership level and an individual level. So they value if you've got big numbers. And I do a range of other aspects that are available there. So some of you know me and have worked with me before, so do feel free to reach out if you've got any development needs that I could work with you on. As ever, we've got lots of resources. Our next webinar is all about team performance, building effective teams. You could invite managers to this one if you wanted to. It doesn't have to be just HR, and there's lots of tools there. And then just to close things down, what will you do as a takeaway, seeing as we're treating this as a learning course? There's one thing that you've taken away from this session, from investing in yourselves, well done for 45 minutes in your own development, taking responsibility for your learning. What do you think you might do as a result of this, or what one learning or reflection have you taken from this? Hopefully it's something that you found of value. And as I say, I'll keep an eye on the chat if anyone's got any questions or wants to stay on afterwards.